Welcome to Diplomatic Passport here on ZTN. This is a very special weekend coronavirus edition of the show to keep you updated on the state of the world and indeed the nation in our global response to the COVID-19 pandemic that has shred the very fabric that constitutes normal everyday life. I'm your diplomat-in-chief, Robert Mkondiwa, and for the next 7 minutes, I'll take you into the corridors of power, because I have an eye in State House where indeed the head of state and government is about to announce for and on behalf of the nation what is going to happen. You may know we're only a couple of breaths shy of the end of the 21-day lockdown period that was announced by the presidency earlier on. And now, perhaps you may want to go and really live these 21 days that we've really endured. And the best way to do so is to go through our timeline of what we've gone through.
Starting Monday, 30th March 2020, and subject to further review, Zimbabwe will be under a total lockdown for a period of 21 days.
The lockdown that was announced by government, and it's supposed to go for 21 days. Government asking and requesting people to stay indoors. Some of the businesses obviously not opening.
But a visit to one of the country's busiest fruit and vegetable markets, Msika, shows that reopening the space was not really a good move, as hygiene levels are low and people are not observing social distancing.
President is a respect of science. So that decision will be informed by science. Whether we are extending the lockdown in its current formatting, or whether we would scale down or change formatting, that will be informed by science.
Well, there you have it. That is where we have come from. Now, earlier on, I was interacting with a lot of people on social media. And before I rehash the words that I gave on Friday, if you're watching Diplomatic Passport, the last edition that we had on Friday, that's like 2 days ago, I'm going to give you those words again. But before that, I've been getting information from people. Tapua Matare says, definitely a lockdown extension. Let's wait and see. Matilda Mambere says, a further 3-week extension, I guess. Wellens Munjuru says, we're ready for whatever it may be. Marshall Shonai says, I will join in, and he wants to know what time it is. The time is now. Tatenda Songore says, it's an extension. The question will be, under what new measures? And that's something very key that the PermSec for information said. Is it going to be extended in its current format, or is it going to take on a new format, or is there going to be extension at all? And he says the president and of course the presidium are respecters of science. I've got Rico Ashley Takawira saying we're ready, data and headphones. Of course, we are ready because we're going to give you this live stream from the corridors of power, from State House, and we're not going to stop the stream. Zimpapers Television Network will always run flawlessly, so keep those headphones on. Tinashe Chidodo thinks we're having to stay at home going forward. Tsungai Marian Mutasa says we're staying home for another extra 3 weeks. She's got 3 weeks that she's betting on. And Plotmaker also thinks that we're going to extend for another 21 days. What's there to say? What's there to say? I think people are tired of staying at home, but of course there's been something that we've been seeing. We've been seeing the cases rising. So do we have a very sensible reason for, us to lift this whole lockdown? And a lot of people are, of course, arguing that we may or may not have that. But this is people I've been interacting with. However, on our other platforms, like especially our Twitter platform, we ran a poll. And a lot of our viewers, a lot of you guys weighed in to say what you think will happen. Now let's go to that poll and see what it's saying. Those things look very pretty, but they're the ugliest thing that we've encountered in our lives. Those who say we should extend are 69.2%. Those who say no are 25.2%. And the maybes who are sitting on the fence are 5.6%. Now, this is something absolutely interesting, hey, because we've had this dark cloud that's been over us for a while. And a lot of you, of course, are giving us that poll. But on Friday, I said, be thankful. Be very, very thankful, at least for now, that I address you as myself and not as the head of state. Because if it was up to me, then certainly I would think, with the way things are and the way this disease is peaking in the country, extension is not a question of if, but rather how much longer. Now, Zimbabwe's business community was asking for a partial lockdown, and we have reported this on ZTN, and I'm sure a lot of you who are dedicated viewers of ZTN will have seen that. But political and economic expedience cannot be allowed to go before the practical reality of risking dead bodies on our hands. And the economy and corporate Zimbabwe should know that we may have a great economy. We may build a great economy. We may have the best economy in the world when we do, but it will be futile if we have dead bodies to feed, because the dead do not feed. So this is something that the Presidium has been looking at. This is the science that the Presidium has been looking at. And right now I've actually got eyes on State House, and they're getting ready to give you this address. You may remember a lot of you were looking at the address at State House yesterday that we gave you, that flawless beauty that we gave you. And you were thinking that the lockdown extension would be mentioned. Of course, the Presidium did not mention anything then, and there you have it. You've also got eyes on State House. I've given you eyes into State House that I'm always privy to. This is what diplomatic passport means. It means taking you to places that you otherwise would not be privy to, and that's why we are here as Zimpapers Television Network. Jürgen Troy Nampira thinks that it will be extended until further notice, but they will throw another 2 weeks. That's what Jürgen is thinking, that perhaps it's 2 weeks. A lot of people, most of the people are saying 3 weeks, but Jürgen throws 2. And somebody says, I think it's an extension. That's Tongimbidzo. I think it's an extension to month end in April. Masimba Mfudza says, we are ready to hear the fate of the nation. I have been in lockdown in Wuhan for 80 days. So, well, 80 days around the world, that's Phileas Fogg. And in that time, Masimba Mfudza has been 80 days around nowhere, around his apartment in China, in Wuhan. Now keep your comments coming through. Keep us posted on what you have been seeing, what you have been going through. However, and most importantly, this is something that I want you to do. Wherever you are, however you've experienced this lockdown, what do you want the president to announce? And let's play a game of pretend. I'm your president, and write to us right now on ZTN, on our Twitter handle, on our Facebook platform, and tell us what you've endured, what you've gone through, and what you would rather see the president do and why. What do you think will happen going forward? I continue to hear this whole barrage of information coming from you. A lot of people saying we need this extension, but other people are thinking that we may need to lift it for a day or two, or perhaps even 3, so that people can go in, restock, buy those crucial essentials. Do not rush for the toilet paper like they did in Europe, because evidently you don't need that. But of course, whatever happens, we need to test, because we need to know the burden, and we need to know the ways of easing the lockdown should it continue. Because of our inertia the last time when we were testing, it meant that we really did, in all fairness, a lackluster job, and we have to live with the fact that lockdown is a key option as we hopefully scale up testing. And I will be happy to say, after we've been harping on and on and on about this, our nation, our government has also stepped in and started testing more and more and more people, even hitting, I'm told, the 1,000 mark. Now, some of you have been talking about what you've been going through. I'm going to read that very soon. But of course, for those joining us right now and you're looking back and thinking, goodness, has it been 21 days already? I'm thinking the same, because as critical staff, I've been in front of your tellies and in front of your mobile gadgets and whatever for the past 21 days, or at least around that number. However, some may be thinking that went very fast, and a lot others will be thinking that did not go fast enough, and we're struggling for basic commodities, for even just that opportunity to walk around. But let us take you through those 21 days and show you what you have gone through, because ZTN has created a timeline for you to watch and see. It's been a very long journey.
Starting Monday, 30th March 2020, and subject to further review, Zimbabwe will be under a total lockdown for a period of 21 days.
The lockdown that was announced by government, and it's supposed to go for 21 days. Government asking and requesting people to stay indoors. Some of the businesses obviously not opening.
But a visit to one of the country's busiest fruit and vegetable markets, Preparedness, shows that reopening the space was not really a good move, as hygiene levels are low and people are not observing social distancing.
The president is a respecter of science. So that decision will be informed by science. Whether we are extending the lockdown in its current formatting, or whether we would scale down or change formatting, that will be informed by science.
Welcome back. You've been seeing the 21 days that you have survived, the 21 days some of you have endured. But I've been enjoying getting that feedback from you right now as we commune and wait for the Presidium to announce what is the way forward. Are we going to work on Monday? Or at least, are you guys joining us at work on Monday? Because we've been at work all this time. Now, Nokutenda Marimo says testing should be scaled up regardless of what happens. Travi J. Bana Shezinu says extension is the only way to go. Let's save lives. Tozona Yekutamba Rapfura. Tate Mashuro says Jaravedue Apakufatoshka. Gatichipiwa my groceries. We are hungry and yet we're scared of dying. And can the government or whosoever intervene and assist with at least basic commodities? Letwin Maregere, a top fan of ours, can't wait and says, Gawachingo Uyaka, Bangoti ga ga ga. I'm sure that's what's going to be happening. And right now, I've got eyes on State House. You can also have these eyes on State House and see what's happening. And it's at that podium that you're going to be seeing them come very soon and make that announcement. So you have to relax a little bit, and this shall soon be over. At least the wait shall soon be over. Brenda Moya says if the Presidium extended, they must also help the communities with food, because people will die of hunger and not coronavirus. We've also got people watching from all over the place. Mangi Chit says give food to the people because we are dying of hunger. Muzimba. Tanaka Jack has got a rather interesting and different opinion to mine, and says lockdown is not the answer as long as there is no food for people to eat. At the end of the day, this will only cause mayhem, he thinks. Well, I think sometimes we really need to make some of the toughest decisions, because we'll look back as a people and say we are one grave less because we made one painful decision more. As we continue to get a lot of you coming on, Joy Tinokunda, it's actually practically a cry for people saying food, food, food. Desire Moyo, we hope to see you happy as we go forward. Thank you for your feedback. And somebody says we need to lift it and continue with social distancing. That's another very different look at the place where we stand today. Christine Utaomire thinks we may just go the South African way. And this is something I was saying as well. Because while we're a sovereign and independent nation, we're proud of our sovereignty and our self-determination. But perhaps if the neighborhood is closed, how do you then open your nation and say we're going it alone? It's like perhaps embargoes on ourselves, on our own being as a country. Because remember, Botswana is closed for quite a while, 6 months we're told. South Africa, our very own back garden is closed, and so is the neighborhood, including, as I said, Botswana and Zambia and Mozambique. So that should also help inform our opening up, as it were. Another thing that informed my thinking on Friday and is how we are still establishing bases from whence to fight COVID. Now, this is a very important idea that I raised, if I do say so myself. Now, the fact that just recently we were still making decisions on where our headquarters were set to be a few days before this lockdown ended was a sign that we hadn't even started in earnest fighting this. Have we really put measures on the ground to fight coronavirus? Because we reported on Friday that Preparedness group of hospitals, for example, was set to be the country's premier COVID-19 management and treatment center for Zimbabwe. And this says that this late, and coming after the government had agreed with suggestions by the Zimbabwe Medical Association to make the hospital the main center, it shows that we really hadn't gotten our act absolutely perfect, absolutely right. And the fact that we're still making these baby steps is probably a sign that we may need extension. We may need it in a different type or in a different way. Are we going to open up for people to at least go and buy basic commodities? Because all you people, most of you people, are crying about access to food and at least opening up, some of the access routes for you to eat, to buy. Mike speaks the reason that I'm talking about and says he does not want corona because he would rather survive and get through this dark point at which we are, and perhaps we will understand, where we are as a people and look back and say we survived. Testing. Hits me Shats, hits Malia says that's all we hear. What about feeding those people? But they have to be people in the first instance to be fed, and that's what I was talking about. That if we are to die out and open up our country, the real burden will probably rise, and when it does, it may reach certain instances that we are not able to contain. Now let me take you back to the 2008-2009 era, when we also had cholera wreaking havoc across our suburbs, and we were also taught the same thing. It wasn't there by the same name, it wasn't social distancing as we know it, but the truth is we were told to wash our hands with soap, and exercise a lot of hygiene. And these are the same things we're being told. But if we failed to listen, and if we failed to make these habits in the past, how do we make them habits in the present? Lloyd Mpunga, thank you for watching, and I'm asking all of you to keep giving us information and keep asking us, telling us what you would prefer. Stanley Kasugwir, thank you for joining us. And our kids is what Tariz is saying. Now on Friday, if some of you joined us, a lot of what I was saying was there's a big story. There is a social welfare story too that we ought to tackle. As we start trying to get, for example, street urchins off the street without proper rehabilitation, we cannot do much to ease their suffering. In fact, while they were given a halfway house out in the central business district, they are not satisfied with the type of rehabilitation that they got. And some of the children who are homeless have also escaped from a safe house that they were staying in Mount Hampden on the outskirts of Harare. And they're back in the streets doing what they know best, and that is begging for alms. The children, together with hundreds of other homeless people, were moved to centers on the outskirts of the city, as I said, as part of measures towards containing the spread of the COVID-19 virus. The homeless people were being accommodated in places like Mount Hampden, Rua Rehabilitation Center, and Jamaica Inn, also along the Harare-Mutare Road. However, some of the juveniles were already back on the streets, and they had no regrets. In fact, one of the children said, and to quote him, he said, "The food rations we were getting at the safe houses is too little. It's better when we fend for ourselves out here on the streets." And that shows you that level of desperation, because while you're in the comfort of your homes, or relative comfort of your homes, and you are struggling and you're having these dire straits and you don't have food, or you want at least a partial lockdown so that you have access to buying food, there are actually some people in our communities that do not have that luxury because they cannot afford anything. So indeed, I think that is something that this speech ought to deal with, that the presidency ought to deal with, because certainly there's a big social welfare issue that we're tackling. Somebody says we are free till 30 April and lockdown will continue from 1 May. This is Tawanda Travolta Joe, who thinks that there may be an opening up of the social welfare issues so that we are allowed to stock up with our salaries and go forward. Also, kumabasa, you should go back to work because taneta namakuwa marain. It just shows you that, as they say, that an idle mind is indeed the devil's workshop. Spare thought also for those people who are always staying at home and do not have these jobs that you're now missing, because they have to endure this every day. Now I'm going to ask that if we can see State House right now, if you've got the visuals to State House right now, some of you are wondering, do we have visuals to State House right now? If we can have those visuals, I want an eye on State House so that perhaps we can look and see there. Some of you are asking right now and saying, when is the president coming? That, of course, is the podium on which he's going to be addressing us, and we are waiting because we want to know do we extend this this period of lockdown or do we not? But also, as you may know, our region has also made its tentative steps towards locking down this very toxic pandemic that has wreaked havoc on the whole planet. And in South Africa, there was a 21-day extension, and in the region, of course, a lot of countries may or may not have extensions of lockdowns, as we know, but they are keeping a leash on their society. We have your poll that we were running. We're still running it, and keep talking to us on ZTN and on our social media platforms. But let us show you this poll that shows what you are saying at home, what you want to see happen. Because while some people are commenting here, a lot of you guys are commenting from there, from the Twitter poll, and telling us what you want and then why. You're qualifying why you want that Twitter poll. So that was the poll there, as you saw. A lot of you people are actually saying you want this lockdown extended because it's better to be at home and be safe than this devil that has wreaked havoc on us as a people. Sharon Chukukwa says, if the lockdown is going to be extended, he must make sure he says no one pays rent until lockdown is over. Then one was a problem, one which is food, not both food and rent. And this is a very important issue that we were tackling throughout on Diplomatic Passport. For those of you who are avid viewers of Diplomatic Passport here on ZTN, we've kept talking on and on and on about the fact that certainly there are a lot of those are social welfare issues that we've got. How can we pay these rentals? Rentals are very difficult to pay when you've been asked to stay at home, because a lot of us live from hand to mouth. A lot of us cannot afford to actually buy groceries for 5-6 days going forward. So certainly, this is something that's very important that's been raised by Sharon Chikukwa. And we're waiting here for your more and more of your real-time information, and we've been getting quite a lot of your real-time information. And somebody is saying, can you show us that timeline yet again, because it informs us of the pain that we've had to go through. So certainly, let us show you that timeline of how this started, as we now await officially the Presidium to come onto that podium and give us this address.
Starting Monday, 30th March 2020, and subject to further review, Zimbabwe will be under a total lockdown for a period of 21 days.
The lockdown that was announced by government, and it's supposed to go for 21 days. Government asking and requesting people to stay indoors. Some of the businesses obviously not opening.
But a visit to one of the country's busiest fruit and vegetable markets, Sika, shows that reopening the space was not really a good move, as hygiene levels are low and people are not observing social distancing.
The president is a respecter of science. So that decision will be informed by science. Whether we are extending the lockdown in its current formatting or whether we would scale down or change formatting, that will be informed by science.
So yes, that is the road that we've traveled, and that is the place that we've been at. And indeed, I'm getting good feedback from you. You're watching, you're giving us feedback. Pascal Mangi, thank you so much for the feedback. Keith Chivanga, thank you so much as well for the feedback. And somebody's saying, we might as well keep this lockdown on because we've got a choice on one hand of hunger on the one hand, but on the other, we've got COVID-19. COVID-19 can be spread, but hunger cannot be spread. So perhaps we're better off locking off that which can be a problem for us as a people and going beyond. However, business has a different view. And we've got a lot of people who are in the front line in business, you so-called captains of industry, who were talking to us over the past week, and they were giving us their reasons for wanting to have something called a partial lockdown. Now, what is a partial lockdown, and will it work in Zimbabwe? Well, a partial lockdown is, for example, some other countries, including Sweden, who are saying the smaller businesses are starting to be allowed to open up. You know, your barber shops, a lot of people have been posting their pictures here on a diplomatic passport of how their beard has grown, how their hair has grown. So yes, there has been quite a lot of people who've been worried that business should open. So let us hear what the Confederation of the Zimbabwe Industries had to say about the place that business finds itself and what they are lobbying for.
All things being equal would be to partially lift the lockdown and allow some more sections of the economy to operate. Otherwise, we end up suffering as a nation from, both the health problems as well as livelihood problems.
Pulling from one end and businesses pulling from the other. Businesses arguing that they cannot go forward without at least a partial lockdown, perhaps for 2 or 3 days to return to effective lockdown. Well, that's not exactly what they said, but at least they are lobbying for the small businesses. Like we said, in Sweden, some small businesses actually started operating, if my memory serves me right, on Saturday. So your little corner barber shop, your little off licenses, your little tuck shops, as it were, have started operating, of course, not in that same mold. Whereas, on the other hand, there is your poll. Let's run your poll one last time as we give you more of what's happening at State House and more of what's being said by captains of industry. Are still saying yes, let's continue with lockdown. 25.2% are saying no, and maybe is 5.6%. And I would like to think maybe is possibly those people who are sitting on the fence on saying, can we have perhaps partial lockdown? Partial lockdown, because some of you just want to come into the CBD or to shops, have a normal shopping day, buy your groceries, buy your amenities, buy what you need, and then go home and restart and keep safe and keep washing those hands and keep that social distancing. Because as we saw, the numbers in Zimbabwe are rising, and of course, we've also seen that in Bulawayo, for example, that has become the new epicenter of COVID-19 ever since that first tragic death in Zimbabwe of our first casualty who happened to be Zororo Makamba. But I spoke of the fact that we were not ready. We've gone 21 days or just about, and we still hadn't prepared enough to have enough beds in our hospitals. And of course, we then moved from Beatrice and Wilkins hospitals, and we're now saying our epicenter of dealing with the virus, our ground zero where we're going to be dealing with these issues is now going to be Preparedness. And of course, that shows that we were caught all thumbs when we were dealing with this issue. However, we've got something from Takuzwa Chiambakwe, who actually went onto the ground to see what was happening and to report back and show us our state of preparedness or lack thereof.
But if you actually look at the structure of Preparedness Central Hospital, every bed in Preparedness Central Hospital has got an oxygen delivery point. Harare is not exactly the same. Preparedness Central Hospital has got a 13-theater suite, 10-bedded high care unit, 10-bedded ICU. It has got secondary set of theaters on the ground floor near casualty and also in Seguruka Guvi Hospital. So in other words, Preparedness Hospital is already set up as a COVID center.
These were the views of the Zimbabwe Medical Association when its representatives met with President Mnangagwa at State House last week. This comes after the realization that in the event coronavirus cases rise, Wilkins and Beatrice infectious disease hospitals will be overwhelmed. As a follow-up to that, Vice President Kemo Mohadi, who chairs the Interministerial Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19, held a meeting with senior doctors who then insisted that Preparedness group of hospitals is the best place to treat COVID-19 patients.
So they said we should actually think of refurbishing Preparedness. And I agree with them that we need for Preparedness. But they went further to say that since Preparedness is a hospital that also admits people that are non-COVID-19, so they need to be divided into two.
A few days later, work to transform the hospital into a premier COVID-19 management and treatment center is underway. Engineers are working round the clock to ensure that in a fortnight it will be ready to treat COVID-19 patients. The hospital will be split into two sections, the red zone for COVID-19 patients and the green zone for patients with other ailments. This section here will be the critical care center where COVID-19 patients will be treated here at Preparedness. Right now there's a lot of dirt and disorder in the room because there's a lot of work being put into it by engineers and a lot of other workers that are putting all hands on deck to ensure that this place is spruced up and ready to start admitting patients in the next 2 weeks. When transformation work is complete, Preparedness group of hospitals will be able to take in a total of 425 COVID-19 patients. This is slightly less than double the capacity of Wilkins and Beatrice infectious disease hospitals, which carry 60 and 160 patients respectively. The critical care center will have a total of 27 intensive care beds. The hospital's management is optimistic that their plan.
So there you have it. You've been seeing, we have been on the ground, we have been interrogating issues. And back to Twitter, where we've got people saying we will be tuned in. We really need to see this. This is Tinoda. We really need an extension, says highly favored. And Tatinda Zindoga says more testing needs to be done. Let's just say that I think extension will be the way, the go-to option. If they do partial, would like to know what they would consider worth opening. Either way, people are just going to be upset. Certainly, and that's what I've been talking about. It's going to be upsetting. Whatever you're going to hear today is stuff that you don't want to hear. You're probably going to hear that there's no extension and it's business as usual, but you don't want to die. Or you will be told there's a full lockdown and we're continuing like this and you don't want to go hungry. Either way, nobody wins. And the only thing that we need is to make sure that COVID-19 is the biggest loser today at whatever will be said at State House. Takunda Vitalis says, Vachadi partial lockdown or else full lockdown, 2 more weeks, he's predicting. Lifting the lockdown is not an option. That's according to Takunda Vitalis. And Mamboloti is watching us from Mtoko High. Certainly, we are following you, and as you follow whatever is happening, Right now, I'm going to have, and it's interesting that somebody is actually watching us from Togo, because after this, I'm going to tell you what's happening in the rural areas, because we're complaining from the urban areas. We're saying we don't have food, we don't have access to certain basics and basic commodities. But imagine what's happening in rural enclaves where, of course, that lockdown is also being practiced and is also being extended to, because this is a nationwide lockdown. But before I show you that, perhaps let me take you back on that diplomatic passport to State House. So there you have it. Maybe they're actually going through your tweets and responses to ZTN, because I would like to tell you this, that our leadership watches ZTN, because we lead the discussion. So whatever you guys are saying here, you actually influence the corridors of power. That's how powerful you are as our viewers. And as you see, there's a bit of a flurry there. There's stuff that's happening right now, and they are following what you guys are saying, and they're probably scared, because either way, you don't want to be the person behind that podium telling people that you're going to have to extend by 1, 2, 3 weeks, or whatever news it is. Because whatever news we're receiving today, it is not good news. Mu Ainona says she doesn't want another Asante Sana. She wants to get information that's going to make her happy, or that's at least going to speak to her. Of course, as I promised, let us move from State House right now, and let us go Kumabuja, Kwamutoko, and see along the way, because we actually traveled as diplomatic passport. While you were in lockdown, we were allowed to go and see what's happening there in the rural areas, to actually empathize with the rural community and see how they have been experiencing this lockdown. With the lockdown in Zimbabwe being affected, the question was how the message had reached the key rural communities. Mutengwa in Zimbabwe's northeastern town of Mtoko is one such place where people gather. Considered a holy mountain, it is the place where the Englishman widely regarded as a Catholic saint-elect John Randall Bradburn lived, prayed, and died. Now thousands gather there each year to pray, seeking intercession and a meeting with God. While they may be locked down, when our team arrives, the faithful are gathered in spite of the lockdown. It is prayers as usual. However, on the morrow, lockdown sends its word up the mountain of God. The authorities, soldiers and police, are rumored to be on their way up the mountain. The people do not wait to test the patience of the authorities and start to make their way down the mountain. What was supposed to be the start of Holy Week, with the religious going up to meet God on Palm Sunday, becomes an unceremonious departure from God. And today is Palm Sunday. Usually, this place will be packed with believers, Catholics and people from all walks of life. But today, nobody is in sight. Instead, word has come here that there may be people from the authorities coming up here to make sure the few believers that were here congregated from last night are herded and shepherded away from this mountain for their own safety. Indeed, they are leaving God and have to meet Him elsewhere. Old and young, they have heard stories of coronavirus and understand what they can about this phenomenon that threatens even their rituals of faith.
Takatadza kupedza matesti nechirwere chinonzi coronavirus. Saka tikaenda kuholidhe tiri kuno kwaMutoko tikakwira ngoma chinamata necoronavirus iyi.
The people descend and instead are leaving God on the mountain, abandoned, forlorn, alone. But they have some consolation. In His omnipotence, they will find Him in their daily lives, at home and in their daily chores, as they start to heed the lockdown in deed and word. They will meet God and continue to commune with Him, just not at the mountain. Oh, there you have it. There you have it. We've been going through, of course, your comments. We've got Bob Jakarasi. Bob Jakarasi is onto something that's absolutely important. He's talking about figures, because this is what we've been following here on Diplomatic Passports. So now onto a roundup of the cases as at Friday morning, which have actually just only been tweaked slightly because there's really been little change over the weekend. COVID-19 cases have now risen as of today to 25, with one of the cases being a 4-year-old girl. And this is according to those figures from the Ministry of Health and Childcare. And so those are the figures that we had as of that day. And going forward, what we know, for example, is that case number 19 is a 4-year-old girl, while case 20, 21, 22 involve 10-year-old, 30-year-old, 34-year-old and 16-year-old female residents of Bulawayo, which, as I said, is now being the epicenter. And that's what the ministry gave us in a statement. Harare has now recorded 9 cases, 1 behind Bulawayo, while Mashonaland East has 4, and Matavelaland North has 1, and Manicaland has 1. 1 person has recovered from the virus, while 3 people have sadly succumbed. And Zimbabwe has, as I said, decentralized and ramped up COVID-19 testing, with by Friday 583 people having been tested across all the country's 10 provinces. To date, 1,219 people have been tested. 1,299 actually had been tested in Zimbabwe, with 1,274 emerging negative. However, earlier on, we also went to Mbare, where we talked to the people in Mbare. We've just seen what was happening outside the city in Mutoko, but now let's see what's happening in the peripheries of our city.
Updates on Zimbabwe's lockdown continue. The lockdown that was announced by Zimbabwe's government on Friday, and is supposed to go for 21 days. I am at Mbare Musika bus terminus, the termini where most people will board their buses as they go around the different provinces of the country. Today, this place is totally deserted. No buses in sight, no travelers in sight either. This, of course, after government announced that there won't be any intercity travel during the 21-day lockdown. Over the weekend, just on Saturday and Sunday, as people were making frantic efforts to go to the rural areas, standing on this very spot that I'm standing on right now would have been nothing short of being suicidal. Hundreds, if not thousands, of travelers were stranded right here at Mbare Musika as they were seeking to travel to their rural areas. So today, the travelers and also the operators, heeding to government's call to not travel and stay indoors during the 21-day lockdown.
So there you have it, Blessing Manasi there, giving us an update of what was happening at a place that usually is a very important and busy flurry of activity here in our country, Mbare Musika. But there you saw it, there was a heeding of lockdown. Of course, as we were saying, this has been the timeline that we've gone through. We're waiting now. We've just gotten word from State House that anytime now the president is going to be emerging. So really quickly, let's go through that timeline to show us what happened until we got to the place that we are at today.
Starting Monday, 30th March 2020, and subject to further review, Zimbabwe will be under a total lockdown for a period of 21 days.
The lockdown that was announced by government, and it's supposed to go for 21 days. Government asking and requesting people to stay indoors. Some of the businesses obviously not opening.
But a visit to one of the country's busiest fruit and vegetable markets, Mbare Musika, shows that reopening the space was not really a good move, as hygiene levels are low and people are not observing social distancing.
president is a respect of science. So that decision will be informed by science. Whether we are extending the lockdown in its current formatting, or whether we would scale down or change formatting, that will be informed by science.
So there you have it. That's the timeline that we've been going through. Right now, I can confirm that I can no longer give you that diplomatic passport to State House. Well, perhaps let me give you the last glimpse of State House, because everything has started rolling right now. As you can see, we've got those images. That's Charamba, George Charamba there. I'm probably telling His Excellency that your people are waiting. And indeed, you're waiting, and you're waiting anxiously with bated breath. We see there a glimpse of Vice President Chiwenga, who is the co-head of one of our, he's the co-head of that task force that has been put together by the nation, by the state. Sugulhle Sibanda, you're watching us. We've not heard word from Sugulhle Sibanda for a while. Really, she's new to us, but we're absolutely happy with the positive feedback that you're giving us. You've seen the president as he's come right there in our frame. He's now coming to take his place at that podium to address the nation, because you've had enough of me. You did not elect me to be your president, and a lot of you are now saying, we've had enough of Robert Chakudawa Mnangagwa, and certainly that will be happening anytime soon. But while the president takes his position, I want to come back and stress something that I said on Friday. I hope the president, I hope the presidium, I hope the nation extends lockdown, because right now, how do we lift this lockdown when really even Preparedness is only just starting to be made the epicenter of where we're fighting this disease from? We had started by saying Beatrice, we had started by saying Wilkins, but remember, these places did not even have oxygen points. But certainly Preparedness, a group of hospitals, has had this for years. Why we decided to say to reinvent the wheel, as it were, and declare that we're using Beatrice and to declare that we're using Wilkins is beyond me. And that's why initially we sent Takudzwa Chihambakwe, that evergreen man. He's our man on the ground with regards this and with regards diplomatic passport. And we sent him and he filed this report. And let's watch this before we hear the president.
But if you actually look at the structure of Preparedness Central Hospital, every bed in Preparedness Central Hospital has got an oxygen delivery point. Harare is not exactly the same. Preparedness Central Hospital has got a 13-theater suite, 10-bedded high care unit, 10-bedded ICU. It has got secondary set of theaters on the ground floor near casualty, and also in Seguruka Guvi Hospital. So in other words, Preparedness Hospital is already set up as a COVID center.
These were the views of the Zimbabwe Medical Association when its representatives met with President Mnangagwa at State House last week. This comes after the realization that in the event coronavirus cases rise, Wilkins and Beatrice infectious disease hospitals will be overwhelmed. As a follow-up to that, Vice President Kemo Mahadi, who chairs the Interministerial Ad Hoc Committee on COVID-19, held a meeting with senior doctors who then insisted that Preparedness, a group of hospitals, is the best place to treat COVID-19 patients.
So they said that we should actually think of refurbishing Preparedness. And I agree with them that we need for Preparedness. But they went further to say that since Preparedness is a hospital that also admits people that are non-COVID-19, so it needs to be they need to be divided into two.
A few days later, work to transform the hospital into a premier COVID-19 management and treatment center is underway. Engineers are working round the clock to ensure that in a fortnight it will be ready to treat COVID-19 patients. The hospital will be split into two sections, the red zone for COVID-19 patients and the green zone for patients with other ailments. This section here will be the critical care center where COVID-19 patients will be treated here at Preparedness. Right now there's a lot of dirt and disorder in the room because there's a lot of work being put into it by engineers and a lot of other workers that are putting all hands on deck to ensure that this place is spruced up and ready to start admitting patients in the next 2 weeks. When transformation work is complete, Preparedness group of hospitals will be able to take in a total of 425 COVID-19 patients. This is slightly less than double the capacity of Wilkins and Beatrice infectious disease hospitals, which carry 60 and 160 patients respectively. The critical care center will have a total of 27 intensive care beds. The hospital's management is optimistic that their plan will go according to schedule. Taku Chiambakwe for ZTN News at Preparedness.
Coming to our own country, we have witnessed a spiking of infections from single digits to the current 25, with 3 of our loved ones already dead. Apart from this growing number of infections, we are deeply worried that the virus is beginning to attack our children, with more and more cases coming from local transmissions. Clearly, the numbers are rising and will soon gallop uncontrollably once we reach the deadly mark of 100, after which the grim multiplier effect kicks in. Once the cases begin to grow exponentially, the strain on our health facilities will be huge. We should thus do our best now to ensure the pandemic levels of at these low, manageable numbers we currently have recorded. Indeed, we should treat the current small numbers of infections as a window of opportunity to tighten our collective national defenses, while providing for the worst case scenario of a fully blown health crisis. This your government has and continues to do within the limited means and the constraints it has. From the very beginning, we have always known that a national lockdown cannot be the cure, the solution. Rather, it merely buys time for us to slow down transmissions while we take other measures and prepare on many fronts to cope and deal with the pandemic. Equally, we have always been conscious of the huge costs which come with a total national lockdown to the economy, to livelihoods, to families, to individuals, and to all our children whose normal lives full of play and learning today stand severely curtailed. But we chose the route of abundant caution, whatever costs and discomforts this route brings upon our whole society. Nothing is more important than life-saving. I have already said the lockdown is not the panacea. It is only a holding operation while we seek real, durable solutions. I want to spend some time explaining our country's strategy, which, if carried out successfully, becomes our exit strategy from this otherwise engulfing danger, and, of course, from the painful measures which this danger has necessitated. Let me emphasize that the national lockdown cannot in itself be the strategy, nor can it last forever. Our national strategy must be founded on, firstly, leveling the pandemic by arresting its spread in the immediate. While we do that, we should take measures that place us ahead of infections, so we hold the disease at bay, while a cure and vaccines are being found and developed respectively. Government has now moved beyond diagnosing cases which present themselves for investigation. This reactive and remedial response clearly comes short of the goal of staying ahead of the virus. Government has now embarked upon expanded tests covering our whole country. This allows us to gauge the magnitude of the problem while promptly isolating cases early enough from the onset of the virus and before more and more people are infected through contact or community transmissions. This broad, proactive approach allows us to detect symptomatic cases which, as we now know, could very well be more deadly since the carrier shows no symptoms in practical terms. This means making available more test kits to more centers countrywide so every citizen is within reach of testing services. Secondly, it means repurposing all our institutions, principally health institutions, our industries, and our research centers and laboratories. With time and before long, all our health institutions, right down to small, remote rural clinics, must become testing centers. It also means we have to increase our laboratories countrywide to ensure results of expanded tests come soon enough to allow for timeous interventions. We thus need a competent cadre across the whole health value chain. This means more recruitments, more specialized training and retraining so our hard-working health workers know how to play their part in the fight against COVID-19 without putting themselves in harm's way. Our industries and tertiary institutions must be repurposed so they can make significant contributions to this new thrust by way of critical skills and services and by way of more and better equipment and consumables we require for this national effort. Over the past few weeks, I have held several meetings with different professionals and business interests in order to mobilize our nation towards this new campaign. The results have been salutary, and I'm quite confident we are geared for better outcomes. Contact tracing comes hard on the heels of testing and treatment. We need to account for all persons who would have come in contact with all infected persons. Experts tell me that an ideal situation is devoting one contact tracer to every 4 infected cases. tracing and isolation limits the multiplier effect of the pandemic. It also allows early treatment, which lightens the burden on our facilities of care. We have to ginger up our infection surveillance systems for speedy detections and contact tracing again. Government is addressing this critical area. Thirdly, as I address you, more of our health institutions are being repurposed to handle the pandemic. The goal is to increase the number of beds for COVID-19 cases in anticipation of increased infections. We have to have on standby more and more well-equipped and stocked facilities which are competent enough to deal with any upsurge in infections. We require more health personnel who can discharge their already onerous care and cure duties, knowing full well that they are well provided for and protected. This means adequate personal protection equipment, PPEs, so we do not lose our committed health cadres while in the line of duty. Government will stop at nothing to ensure our institutions are fully equipped and stocked, and in ensuring our health personnel are fully kitted and motivated. From the foregoing, three objectives become apparent. One, we must flatten and then arrest the infection curve. Two, we must raise the line of tests through expanded testing. And three, we must see more COVID-19 recoveries so our health institutions are not overburdened. Fellow Zimbabweans, the 3-week national lockdown, which has been underway, ordinarily expires at midnight. Government has reviewed the situation obtaining in the country, around us, in the region, and worldwide. As I have already indicated, incidences of infection in our country to date have risen to 25. This figure comprises both imported and local transmissions, with the trend clearly showing that more and more we are now dealing with in-country transmissions. We are also facing a new situation where more and more of our citizens are coming back home, including from countries heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This presents an unavoidable but growing threat to our nation, as we must accommodate all our returning citizens. The country is yet to meet the conditions for lifting the lockdown that were recently announced by World Health Organization. Key among these conditions is the need to have in place health systems that are capable to test, isolate, treat, and trace every contact. The need to lift the lockdown or restrictions is when the transmission of the virus is fairly under control. As I have also already indicated, worldwide cases of infections continue to gallop, with the World Health Organization cancelling against relaxing lockdowns currently adopted by almost all countries of the world. Guided by these realities, and to allow ourselves greater leeway to prepare for worse times which are likely ahead, government has decided to extend with immediate effect the national lockdown by a further 14 days. That means the national lockdown, which would have expired at midnight, stands extended by another 2 weeks up to 3rd May 2020. It has been a very hard decision my government has had to take reluctantly, but it has been a necessary and unavoidable decision in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We need to maintain the same level of national and self-restraint as we have shown in the 3 weeks which have gone by, all in the interest of our nation and of ourselves individually. Government is acutely aware of the need to keep the economy running, albeit at subdued levels. With this objective in mind, government has decided to allow the mining sector to resume or scale up operations, even then within parameters set by the World Health Organization regarding social distancing and other public health safety measures. I have now directed the Ministries of Health and Child Care and that of Mines and Mining Development to work closely to ensure the workforce in the mining sector is immediately screened and tested ahead of resumed operations. Further, to the extent possible, I have directed that workers in the mining sector remain within the precincts of their accommodation at workplaces for the duration of the lockdown. In respect of our manufacturing sector, I have further directed that limited operations resume in the national interest, but mindful of the public health safeguards as already announced. Inspectors will be visiting all operations to ensure these safeguards are being strictly adhered to. This reprieve covers our manufacturers in our informal sector and SMEs as well, who have to use these 2 weeks to rebuild their capacities and stocks. The responsible ministry is also directed to work closely with the health authorities to ensure there is order and safety in that sector, so critical to livelihoods. As government, we continue to explore ways of mitigating the impact of the lockdown on all businesses, big and small, so our economy recovers more rapidly after the pandemic. Essential services continue as before, operating within designated times and parameters, as already announced. I am happy that the Department of Social Welfare has begun rolling out support schemes and measures targeting vulnerable families throughout the country. These measures, which include cash disbursements, will be fine-tuned and intensified so needy families are supported throughout the period of the national lockdown. Our security arms will step in to assist, including facilitating essential movements of our citizens during this difficult period. I shall be visiting a few more places, both in towns and cities and in our rural areas, to see firsthand how families are coping and what extra measures we need to take as government to make the burden of the national lockdown bearable. Fellow Zimbabweans, the Second Republic is a listening, a caring dispensation. We continue to listen to any suggestions you might have as citizens, so we make our responses to COVID-19 both effective and bearable. Once again, I would like to thank you all for the high level of self-discipline we have shown in the 3 weeks we have been under national lockdown. I trust and I hope that this will continue for the next 2 weeks, after which government will announce any appropriate way forward, of course, guided by realities on the ground. Together, we will win against the pandemic. I wish you all and your families good health. I thank you.
During this COVID-19...
Are you happy? Sorry? There's no need for them to be happy.
Your Excellency, the tobacco people, their tobacco already ready for the market. What are they supposed to do, because you never mentioned anything about the tobacco season?
Well, with regard to the tobacco sector, the TMB, that's the Tobacco Board, has been sitting and consulting our task force. And they have come to an agreement, to an arrangement, where the tobacco auction flows are going to be decentralized countrywide to minimize crowding. And in the process, they are going to observe the measures such as social distancing, and also the question of accommodation will be regulated as to who comes and which day, because then the areas of concentration will be limited in terms of the decentralization and the spread.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Join Access Forex in delivering food to the underprivileged in our communities. Let's take action. Join the Feed a Million Challenge. Let every Zimbabwean have food on their table. Access Forex, helping you take care of home. Visit www.feedamillion.co.zw. Access Forex, bringing you closer to home.
The world is under attack. No place is safe from COVID-19. Not even our beloved Zimbabwe. To complement government efforts in the fight against this pandemic, NASA, which falls under the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, has availed 2 facilities for utilization in combating the deadly virus. The Beitbridge Hotel will be used as a transit isolation center for returning residents from South Africa. Travelers will be required to quarantine for the designated 21 days at the center in our bid to monitor and contain the virus from spreading further. Ekuseni Treatment Center joins the various treatment centers set up nationwide for patients undergoing treatment for COVID-19. NASA has taken a step further by providing our pensioners with a once-off bonus equivalent to a month's pay. And we have also taken it upon ourselves to fix the ventilator at the Mutare General Hospital to kickstart treatment and help save lives. The fight against COVID-19 is our fight. Help keep Zimbabwe safe. Help save lives. NASA, ours is a lifelong promise.
Well, there you have it. That's what you've been waiting for. Of course, like we said here on Diplomatic Passport, it was always going to be important to continue with lockdown in its current format. Of course, there's been an announcement now that the mining industry and certain arms of manufacturing will have to go back to work in the national interest. But like I said, we could not lift lockdown. So if you've been watching Diplomatic Passport with me here, you know that we always keep tabs on what's happening, and we always have eyes and ears in the corridors of power. And whatever it is that you heard today, stuff that we've been discussing here and we were able to predict. So we're going to be seeing how this goes beyond the 3rd of May. But the president said stuff that I've been saying all the time. We've been caught napping. We need to scale up testing. We need to repurpose the health centers and industries and research centers. We need to decentralize testing because it is preposterous what is happening in Bulawayo, for example. We need more recruitments of doctors and more training and retraining of those that we have at the moment. We need PPEs and more consumables, and we need better contact tracing. This is a no-brainer. We kept saying this over and over and over again, and this is what you've heard indeed on this special edition of Diplomatic Passport. So for those who want to keep tabs, we shall be continuing to speak to relevant people. You've raised important issues. How are the security services going to be conducting themselves? For example, some of you are complaining, Kuti, at those roadblocks, you're not being treated well. Our sister paper, The Herald, complained about that the other day, and we continue to monitor that, and we'll continue to ask questions from the people who matter, because people are supposed to be on lockdown, but they really need to be having those other fundamental rights, because we've got a right to our dignity, and we cannot and should not have security services making us uncomfortable and unhappy. Instead, we should look to them for their support, and we should look to them for them to at least safeguard those fundamental rights that we have. Joyce Gore says, actually, if it were up to her, it wouldn't be 3 May. She says it's not enough. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us here. Bob Jakarasi says no thank you to the frontline workers. He thinks we should have said something about the frontline workers. And of course, but I would want to say we may not have spoken about that officially, but thank you too to people like you, Bob Jakarasi, people who keep watching ZTN, because we're on the pulse. We always follow the story, and we always make sure that that stream grows from start to finish flawlessly, because what good is a story? What good is a speech? What good is an announcement? And what good is a pronouncement if you don't hear it to the very, very end? And for those who keep watching me every day here on Zimpapers Television Network, continue to do that, and continue to write to me on robertnkondiwa@ztn.co.zw, or on my Twitter handle @ZimRobbie, that's ZIMROBBIE, with your feedback. So for today, I'm Robert Nkondiwa. Good evening, God bless, stay home, stay safe, and indeed, it's going to be until the 3rd of May at the very, very earliest.